In this video, we'll be talking about the question larynx, its cartilages, ligaments, joints, muscles, and we'll also talk about how to draw your frontal section of your larynx. So this is the frontal section of your larynx. First, you'll have to, you would probably start off by drawing your epiglottis, right, and your hyoid bone, right. Your thyroid cartilages and your cricoid cartilages are here. Now, this is the major diagram. The most important parts that you're supposed to label would be your epiglottis, your thyroid cartilage, your cricoid cartilage, your tracheal cartilage, these four cartilages. Then you have two major membranes that you're supposed to talk about here, which is your quadrangular membrane, yeah, this part, and your conus elasticus, right? Um, we'll talk about all of these in detail like later in this video, but this is a major frontal section diagram that you're supposed to know. Your laryngeal inlet is also called your adductus laryngis, and it connects your pharynx to your larynx. Uh, there are a few ligaments that you can label here, which is your thyrohyoid ligament from your thyroid cartilage to your hyoid bone. Then you have your thyroepiglottic muscle, right? Thyroid cartilage, and then there's your epiglottis, so thyroepiglottic muscle. You have your vestibular ligament, vocal ligament, which form your vestibular fold and your vocal fold, and the space in between, it's called your laryngeal ventricle. There are two other openings that you have to talk about, which is your rima vestibula and rima glottis. And your rima glottis is the narrowest point of your larynx, right? And then you also have your cricotracheal ligament and two other muscles, cricoarytenoid muscles and thyroarytenoid muscles. Uh, you will be we'll be talking about this more in the slides later. So this is the major diagram that you're supposed to draw in this question. Now, larynx, where is it present? Okay, your larynx in the adult, it's present in your C4 to C5 level, but in your newborn, it's in your C3 to C4 level. Now, the layers of your larynx include your mucus layer, submucous connective tissue, membrane and ligaments, cartilages, and then your muscles. Now, the mucus layer, we'll be talking about the histological point of view in the last slide of this video. Uh, yeah, and we can also divide the larynx into spaces. You have your subglottic space, which is inferior, your transglottic space, and your supraglottic space. And you can see the purple part, green part, and the pink part as it is labeled. Now, general features, you have your hyoid bone, your thyrohyoid membrane. Again, we'll talk about which ligaments are a part of it, what pierces through it later. You have your epiglottis, your thyroid cartilage with your laryngeal prominence right here, your cricoid cartilage, and your tracheal cartilages. Now, cartilages of your larynx, there's two things that you'll have to talk about. There are unpaired cartilages and then there are paired cartilages. In your unpaired cartilages, you have epiglottis, thyroid, and your cricoid cartilage. So there are three unpaired cartilages. First is your epiglottis. It is in the form of a leaf shape and it is made up of your elastic cartilage. It is important to know which of these cartilages are elastic and hyaline. So this epiglottis is elastic. It is the major entrance point of your larynx and it helps in swallowing food because it closes your larynx to prevent food from going into your respiratory tract. Now, the parts of your epiglottis is you have a stalk and then you have a lamina. And this is basically anterior to the stalk is basically anterior to your thyroid cartilage. We'll see the relative positions in another image later. Now, secondly, you have your thyroid cartilage, which is made up of hyaline cartilage. It is the largest palpable cartilage of your larynx, and the Adam's apple that you see is your thyroid cartilage. And the structures, you have your right and left lamina, your laryngeal prominence, you have your superior horn, inferior horn, and in the inferior horn, you have your articular fossa for another cartilage, which is your cricoid cartilage. You also have an oblique line, a superior and inferior thyroid tubercle that that is present at the ends of your oblique line. Then you have your inferior thyroid notch, superior thyroid notch, uh, as like the major parts of your thyroid cartilage. You can see the frontal view as well over here. Superior horn, inferior horn, your left and right lamina, the laryngeal prominence, superior and inferior thyroid notch, and your oblique line. Your articular fossa for cricoid cartilage is present in the inferior horn of your thyroid cartilage. Now, your cricoid cartilage is the third unpaired cartilage, which is made up of hyaline cartilage. There's the When you look at the anterior view, you have the yellow part, which is the lamina. It's like a ring-shaped cartilage, and it's the most inferiorly placed cartilage of your larynx at the level of about C6, right? You have two fossas or like articular surfaces. One is for your arytenoid cartilages, which are paired, and then you have your thyroid articular surface, where the inferior horns, the right and left inferior horns of your thyroid cartilages, they are in contact with this. Now we move on to the head cartilages. You have arytenoid cartilages, which sits on the cricoid cartilages on the articular surfaces. Now, arytenoid cartilage basically is made up of hyaline, but you can see this purple part. It forms another paired cartilage called the corniculate cartilage that forms the apex, right? And this is elastic. The base of your adenoid cartilage is hyaline, and it has a vocal process that has an attachment towards your vocal ligament. It also has your cricoid articular surface. Now, uh, now you can see the relative position, like in this picture. This is your thyroid cartilage. This is your cricoid cartilage. This will be your arytenoid cartilage, and this will be your corniculate cartilage. Now you have also another cartilage called the cuneiform cartilage, which is elastic, and it forms your cuneiform tubercle. This this is basically present like in the lateral part of your corniculate cartilage, and it is there in your aryepiglottic fold. Now we'll talk about ligaments. You have extrinsic ligaments which are present externally, and then you have your intrinsic ligaments. Your extrinsic ligaments include your thyrohyoid membrane that we saw in the very first picture. Um, yeah, thyrohyoid membrane or ligament, and then here, right? The thyrohyoid membrane basically has two ligaments that form it. Okay, you have your median thyrohyoid ligament and your lateral thyrohyoid ligament. Your median one is present anteriorly, while your lateral one is present posteriorly. Now, as I already said before, there are certain structures that pierces through this particular membrane, which is your superior laryngeal artery and the internal branch of your superior laryngeal nerve. These supply certain muscles of the larynx, which we'll again talk about later when we talk about the muscles of your larynx. Then you also have your hyoepiglottic ligament, which is from your hyoid bone to your epiglottis. And then you have your cricotracheal ligament, which is from your cricoid cartilage to your tracheal cartilages. And this is something you can label in your very first diagram that I had shown, the frontal section of your larynx. Then you have your intrinsic ligaments or internal ligaments. You have your thyroepiglottic, from your thyroid cartilage to your epiglottis, and then you have a cricoarytenoid from your cricoid cartilage to your arytenoid cartilage. You also have your cricothyroid ligament, which is like a continuation from your conus elasticus, if which is also labeled in the frontal section diagram, which is a very important structure, along with your quadrangular membrane, right? And your quadrangular membrane over here, as you can see, it is between your arytenoid and your epiglottis, and at the lower end is your vestibular ligament. And your cricothyroid ligament, on its upper end, you'll have your vocal ligament. Now you can see in these pictures, your thyrohyoid membrane, there's a piercing or opening for your superior laryngeal artery and your superior laryngeal nerve, like for the internal branch to get in. You have your thyroepiglottic ligament, which is from your thyroid. You can see it is attached to your epiglottis. Then you have your cricoarytenoid ligament, cricoid cartilage to your arytenoid cartilage, and then your cricotracheal ligament from your cricoid cartilage to your tracheal cartilages. The two major joints that you'll talk about in your larynx is your cricothyroid and your cricoarytenoid joint. Both of them are synovial joints. That means they have a synovial fluid, right? And the major function of your cricothyroid joint is to move your thyroid cartilage forward and like tilt it down. You can see in this picture, right? It is between your cricoid cartilage and your thyroid cartilage. It's like a synovial capsule with a synovial fluid. Then the ligaments that form this particular joint are your anterior, lateral, and posterior cricothyroid ligaments. And what nerve supplies it is your branches from your RLN or recurrent laryngeal nerve and superior laryngeal artery and inferior laryngeal artery are the arteries that supply to this particular joint. Then you have a cricoarytenoid joint, which is also a synovial joint, as you can see. It's between your cricoid and your arytenoids. This is the synovial joint with the synovial fluid. The major ligament that takes a part in this joint is your cricoarytenoid ligament, the posterior one. And what it's responsible for is sliding and rotation of your arytenoid. Again, these are also supplied by the same nerves and your arteries. Okay, now we talk about the muscles. Now, overall, you have your extrinsic group of laryngeal muscles, which majorly involve itself in moving the larynx inferiorly and superiorly. I've highlighted all the muscles here. Your digastric, anterior and posterior belly, mylohyoid muscles, stylohyoid, thyrohyoid, then your superior digastric belly, sternohyoid, infra and even suprahyoid muscles. All of these are your extrinsic muscles of your larynx. There are three groups that we'll talk about: anterior group, lateral group, and your posterior group. The anterior group, you have one major muscle, which is your cricothyroid muscle. It has two parts, uh, a straight part and an oblique part, as you can see in this particular diagram. The external branch of your superior laryngeal nerve is the one that supplies to these two parts of the muscles, and the function is to tense your vocal cords, and it also opens your laryngeal inlet. Your posterior group of muscles, you have three muscles, which is your uh, aryepiglotticus muscle, arytenoidus, and your posterior cricoarytenoideus muscle. Uh, in this diagram, you can see the relations, red ones, and then the blue ones, and then the pink ones. Uh, your arytoepiglotticus muscle basically closes your arytus larynges, which is your laryngeal inlet, and it is supplied by your internal branch of superior laryngeal nerve. Your arytenoidus, it basically has three parts: the transverse or straight part, and then two oblique arytenoid muscles. You can see in this diagram as well. The major function is to adduct your vocal cords, and it also closes the gemma glottis, This one is also supplied by the internal branch of your superior laryngeal nerve. Then you have your posterior cricoarytenoides, which is the only abductor of your vocal cords, and it does a function opposite to your arytenoides. It opens the rima glottis. The nerve that supplies is your inferior laryngeal nerve, which is a branch from your recurrent laryngeal nerve. Then you have your lateral group of laryngeal muscles, which include the adductors of your vocal cords. Now, all of these three muscles are supplied by your recurrent laryngeal nerve. So, what are the three muscles? You have your thyroepiglotticus, thyroarytenoides, which is your vocalis muscle, and then lateral cricoarytenoid. Functions, as you've seen, I've already written it here. You can see everything in this diagram. Uh, you have your lateral cricoarytenoid, thyroarytenoid, and your thyroepiglottic um, part of your thyroepiglottic muscle. This is the overview of all the nerves that supply to your larynx. It's majorly your superior laryngeal nerve, which has an external branch that supplies to your anterior group muscles, and an internal branch of the superior laryngeal nerve that supplies your posterior um, group muscles. And then you also have an inferior laryngeal nerve that also supplies one of the posterior group muscles and branches from your recurrent laryngeal nerve. You can also see an important anastomosis here, which is called the Gallen's anastomosis. Now, clinically, there's a procedure called coniotomy or cricothyrotomy, and this is basically an incision in your cricothyroid ligament, which is used in emergencies where you need to prevent like an airway obstruction that was created in your respiratory tract, right? And the difference between a tracheotomy and cricothyrotomy is that uh, tracheotomy cannot be done in an emergency situation, but a coniotomy can, right? It's basically an incision in your median cricothyroid ligament, right? And you also have a high tracheotomy and a lower tracheotomy. Um, and the levels of these is very important, and that's what professors really like to ask. Um, when there's an incision created right below your cricoid cartilage, you can see your cricoid cartilage. Right below it, it'll be your higher tracheotomy, and then when you directly make an incision superior to your jugular notch, you can see your jugular vein here. So your superior to your jugular notch will be your lower tracheotomy. Now, the histological aspect of your mucosal lining of the larynx, you have your respiratory epithelium, which is basically your pseudostratified ciliated columnar epithelium that covers your internal part of your larynx. Then you have your non-keratinized stratified squamous epithelium, which line your vocal folds and the superior part of your epiglottis, and the rest of your epiglottis has stratified columnar epithelium. For this particular video, I had used like KenHub, Teach Me Anatomy. These websites are very useful for knowing the joints, the muscles. There are also videos that you can see that show the function of the muscles. And yeah, it's majorly from here. You can definitely have a look through it.